Luigi Mangione planned a mass casualty terrorist attack with a bomb, or at least he thought about it. That is what a new court filing alleges about the man police say assassinated UnitedHealthcare CEO Brian Thompson. The 82-page document submitted by New York prosecutors unveils some of what Mangione allegedly wrote in a red spiral notebook that was found in his backpack when he was arrested at a Pennsylvania McDonald's, including an alleged handwritten confession. Not only that, but we have also learned that the morning Mangione allegedly shot Brian Thompson, it wasn't the first time that he was close to the healthcare executive. He allegedly stalked him in preparation for murder. We're on the case presented by Law&Crime. I'm Stewart. We have the dozens of pages that prosecutors in New York just filed. They give us an inside look to the mind of Luigi Mangione. They are in his own words and they are handwritten. New York prosecutors filed the more than 80-page document in a response to a request by Mangione's defense to suppress evidence in the trial and even dismiss the state's case altogether. Let's go back to December 4th, 2024. UnitedHealthcare CEO Brian Thompson was in New York for an investor conference. Thompson led the largest health insurance company in the United States. And if you've been following this story, you know what happened just before 7 o'clock that morning in the heart of Midtown Manhattan. Police say a man with a backpack, all dressed in black, walked across the street and executed Thompson by shooting him in the back. The weapon, according to police, a ghost gun, a 3D printed firearm. We'll get into the new facts that we are learning about the hunt for Mangione in just a moment, but the first bombshell in this new document has to do with what happened before Mangione allegedly shot Thompson, because that shooting was not the first time. Prosecutors say that Mangione was physically close to Thompson the night before, around 8 p.m. Prosecutors say that Thompson was walking down a Manhattan street when a man walked by him. The man was talking on a phone, and that man was Luigi Mangione. Mangione had been staying, according to prosecutors, at a hostel since the end of November, and this document suggests that he was waiting for his alleged target to arrive in New York. Less than a week after Thompson was killed, Mangione was arrested at a McDonald's in Altoona, Pennsylvania. There was a customer who spotted him and recognized him from the news. When police arrested Mangione, not only did he have $7,800 in cash and a passport, but he also had a red spiral notebook. Prosecutors say it was a diary, and now we're learning some of what was written in it. On August 15th, more than 3 months before Mangione allegedly killed Brian Thompson, Luigi writes, quote, "I finally feel confident about what I will do. The details are coming together and I don't feel any doubt about whether it's right/justified. I'm glad in a way that I've procrastinated because it allowed me to learn more about UHC." Then let's go to October, where Mangione makes his intentions allegedly clear. Quote, "The investor conference is a true windfall. It embodies everything wrong with our health system, and most importantly, the message becomes self-evident. The problem with most revolutionary acts is that the message is lost on normies. For example, Ted Kaye makes some good points on the future of humanity, but to make his point, he indiscriminately mail bombs innocents. Normies categorize him as an insane serial killer, focus on the act/atrocities themselves, and dismiss his ideas. And most importantly, by committing indiscriminate atrocities, he becomes a monster, which makes his ideas those of a monster, no matter how true. He crosses the line from revolutionary anarchist to terrorist, the worst thing a person can be." Mangione is allegedly referring to Ted Kaczynski, who is known as the Unabomber. He killed 3 people and hurt 23 others by sending explosives in the mail over the span of roughly 20 years. And this isn't the first time that Mangione allegedly looked up to the Unabomber. You might remember in the days after his arrest, it was discovered on the book review site Goodreads that Mangione reportedly once referred to Kaczynski as a revolutionary, which matches up with what he said allegedly in this red spiral notebook diary. Before I get back to this story about Luigi Mangione, let's take a second and talk about something really important, because when you cover true crime, if you watch our content here on Law&Crime, the truth is the world can feel like a very crazy place and you want to feel safe. And here's a way that we hope that you can find that safety. I'm excited to tell you about a product that we at Law&Crime created. It is the Law&Crime Safety Bracelet. This is a bracelet that you can wear around your wrist or keep in your car, your purse, your bag. It includes several items that can help give you peace of mind. This is what I mean. There's a whistle that has that classic high pitch that can be great for drawing attention when it matters most. There's a compact flashlight that can be used to guide you in the dark or even signal for assistance. And there's a seatbelt cutter that you can use in case of a car emergency, and a handy utility knife for multiple uses, and these are just to name a few. So right now, head over to truecrimegoods.com and use promo code SAFETY15. That'll give you 15% off. Get your bracelet, carry it with confidence wherever you go. All right, let's get back to the story. The new filing from prosecutors also shows that Mangione may have allegedly planned to kill Thompson before December 4th, but also allegedly thought about doing something that would hurt more people. In that August diary entry, Mangione wrote, quote, "KMD would have been an unjustified catastrophe that would be perceived mostly as sick, but more importantly, unhelpful. Would do nothing to spread awareness, improve people's lives. The target is insurance. It checks every box." At the time of this recording, it's unclear what Mangione meant by KMD, but in his October post where he allegedly writes that he's decided to target Brian Thompson, an entry reads, quote, "So say you want to rebel against the deadly greed-fueled health insurance cartel. Do you bomb the HQ? No. Bombs equal terrorism. Such actions appear the unjustified anger of someone who simply got sick, had bad luck, and took their frustration out on the insurance industry while recklessly endangering countless employees." Mangione then allegedly continues, "Whack the CEO at an annual parasitic bean counter convention. It's targeted, precise, and doesn't risk innocence." Prosecutors not only showed the evidence they have related to those handwritten diary entries, they also included what appears to be an alleged handwritten confession to the federal government. That says, quote, "To the feds, I'll keep this short because I do respect what you do for our country. To save you a lengthy investigation, I state plainly, I wasn't working with anyone. This was fairly trivial, some elementary social engineering, basic CAD, a lot of patience. The spiral notebook, if present, has some straggling notes and to-do lists that illuminate the gist of it. My tech is pretty locked down because I work in engineering, so probably not much info there. I do apologize for any strife or trauma, but it had to be done. Frankly, these parasites simply had it coming." Mangione then allegedly goes on to say that the US has the most expensive healthcare system in the world and is roughly the 42nd ranked country for life expectancy. Prosecutors not only laid out the evidence they had, they also didn't hold back in saying why it matters. In bold letters, they write, "The identity of Brian Thompson's assassin is no mystery." And they go on to say, quote, "If there were ever an open and shut case pointing to the defendant's guilt, this case is that case. Simply put, one would be hard-pressed to find a case with such overwhelming evidence of guilt as to the identity of the murderer and the premeditated nature of the assassination." Mangione's defense has tried to get the terrorism enhancement on his state murder charge dismissed, but prosecutors point to the definition of terrorism as an act undertaken to intimidate or coerce a civilian population, influence the policy of a unit of government by intimidation or coercion, or affect the conduct of a unit of government by murder, assassination, or kidnapping. Prosecutors point to the civilian population as being those who work in healthcare. They say people have left their jobs out of fear since Thompson was assassinated. Doctors who are afraid of what happens if they have a patient who gets their claim denied, and people in places like call centers who have received death threats in the wake of Thompson's death. Mangione has pleaded not guilty to state charges as well as the charges he is facing in federal court. Those federal charges include using a firearm to commit murder, which, if he's found guilty, would make him eligible for the death penalty. It's unclear when Mangione could go on trial. Even though Luigi Mangione is an accused murderer, he has received a lot of support, and his arrest has sparked a larger conversation about healthcare in America. And this is an example of the kind of support that Luigi Mangione is receiving. This is the crowdfunding campaign that is raising money for his defense. It now has more than $1 million in donations. Joining us now to talk about what this means is Matt Mangino, criminal defense attorney and former district attorney. Thank you for taking the time to be with us on Law and Crime. What are your
Thank
big
you.
takeaways when you go through these dozens of pages from prosecutors in New York related to Luigi Mangione?
Well, it's essentially a confession. I mean, he's mapped out exactly what his plans were, why he wanted to do what he did, other alternative plans like some sort of mass homicide, of some sort of terrorist act, you might even call it. So, this really is a blueprint, and he followed that blueprint.
When you read through the confession part, this handwritten note that was addressed to the feds, and it's almost as if he's countering what his defense has been, saying, "Hey, I did this. This is how I did it." If you're a defense attorney on this case, how do you counter the evidence that the prosecution has?
Well, the one hope that I think they have, and it's been raised in Pennsylvania where he was arrested, in Altoona, Pennsylvania, and that is that this was an illegal arrest, and it was these documents were the so-called fruit of the poisonous tree. That this manifesto, which was found on him, should not be able to be used against him. It should be suppressed because of the violation of his constitutional rights during the arrest.
And with that, because his defense has argued when he was in Altoona there in central PA and the police officers come up to him that they did not allow him to leave that McDonald's had he wanted to leave that McDonald's. How strong of an argument is that?
Well, it's really a technical argument when you're looking at the Fourth Amendment, okay? Because if you're not free to leave, okay, then the questioning by the police becomes a custodial interrogation. And that custodial interrogation requires that you be Mirandized, that your rights be read to you. So they're looking at a very technical aspect of the law, and whether or not uh, these questions, without having been Mirandized, and his search were in fact illegal because of that.
And when you strip away, let's just say the ruling comes down that everything that was found, including this confession, cannot be used in court, which would be incredible if that was the case. They still have evidence from the scene. In this filing, it came out that the morning that Brian Thompson was killed, that wasn't actually the first time prosecutors say that Luigi was close to him, that apparently they passed each other on the street, and assuming that Luigi allegedly was kind of stalking Brian Thompson ahead of putting this plan into motion. What did you make of that? How important is that revelation that's now come forward in this document?
Well, I think that's important. And if we were back 25 years ago, where you don't have all this video surveillance and all this other technology that's available now in terms of investigations, suppression of these written documents could be fatal to this prosecution. But that's not the case anymore. Certainly, you want to be able to use that because it's very important. It is the defendant taking responsibility for his conduct in writing as it's going along, and so that's great evidence. But this case would far from being over if in fact these documents were suppressed, because there's so much other documentation. I mean, we have in this case, a video surveillance of the crime itself, and we have all this other sort of historical data that was put together of where he went immediately after that, where he was before it, and as you said, even days before it, encountering the same victim. So you have that idea, that he's preparing for this assassination. So yeah, there's evidence for this case to go forward, whether or not these documents were admissible or not.
It's pretty clear from the journal entries, the diary entries that was included in this that Luigi Mangione, I mean, he had it out for the healthcare industry, and he, according to these entries, was targeting UnitedHealthcare because it was the number one health insurer in the country. So there was this political motive that he had to commit this crime. He's facing this terrorism enhancement charge in the state of New York. How strong of an argument does the state have for this to be considered an act of terrorism?
Well, I think they have a strong case in that regard, and I think number one, the reason that they want to go in that direction is because the death penalty is on the table. So they're certainly going to work as hard as they can. Now, if this was a state prosecution in New York doesn't have the death penalty, so they couldn't pursue the death penalty in state court. But because of this, terrorism statute enhancement, they have the ability to do that. So that's the primary focus there. I mean, when you look at these documents, you clearly see, that this was, you know, an intentional, premeditated act. I mean, a lot of times when we hear about homicide, for instance, um, we hear about premeditation and it's something that happened very quickly. How can you form that intent? And you can. So you can inform you can have the intent to kill in a matter of seconds. But here we have sort of the prototype of premeditated murder. This is someone who had made a decision, had documented that decision, had gone out and followed the victim, gone out and surveilled the victim, and then ultimately laid in wait until the victim showed up and committed this assassination. I mean, this is, the epitome of a planned, premeditated assassination.
Yeah, and I thought it was interesting how the prosecutors, right, Alvin Bragg signed off on it, saying that this is perhaps the clearest example of an open and shut case in their opinion. If all the evidence is submitted and the ruling comes down that this notebook, this letter to the federal government, this is all fair game. I mean, what do you do as a defense at that point when you have your client literally saying, this is everything I did and this is why I did it?
Yeah, I mean, that is an uphill battle for any defense attorney to try to deal with all the evidence that's been accumulated in this case, and especially if all of it is admissible. The only thing that I think you could do would be to work toward saving his life. Presenting whatever mitigation might be uh, out there, that he has a mental health issue, that he's had a mental health crisis, and that this was not the workings of an individual who had all of their mental faculties in order, and try to mitigate, um, because having mental illness is not a defense to committing a crime, regardless of what that crime is. But it could be a mitigating factor, and so those will be the kind of decisions that the defense team, along with Luigi Mangione, are going to have to sit down and sort through. What's our objective here? Our objective here may not be a not guilty verdict. It may be preventing the death penalty.
Can you rely on, listen, there's a lot of people who don't like the healthcare industry in this country. We've seen from the crowdfunding efforts for Luigi Mangione, the people in the streets that have been supporting him. How much of a concern is a jury pool that might just be sympathetic to Luigi Mangione, not because of what he allegedly did, but because of what he is allegedly trying to stand for by committing murder in the street of New York?
But what you'd have to do is, hope for jury nullification. So you know, juries can show sympathy for an individual to the point where they nullify what otherwise would be a conviction, of terrorism or homicide or whatever that case may be. Jury nullification cases are very, very rare, and very rare when it comes to the death of a victim in a case. Um, but that's something I guess that you could try to wrap your hands around in terms of presenting to the jury that the healthcare industry. You probably wouldn't even be able to get away with it because the issue would be relevancy in this case. But yeah, there are cases where jurors nullify and basically, even though they've they've taken an oath and said they have a responsibility to uphold the law, and this case has been proven beyond a reasonable doubt, they could still find not guilty. It's extremely rare.
And he's also facing, and in this story, this document, this comes from the case he's facing in New York, but he is also facing federal charges, which he has also pleaded not guilty to. How does this all, I guess, how does this all work out? Because he's facing these serious charges in New York. The federal government wants him as well, both of them for the same crime. How can this potentially play out with both sides going after Luigi Mangione?
Well, you would hope that there is some cooperative effort between the two jurisdictions who have the ability to prosecute this case. And there's also a case in Pennsylvania, which is not as serious, certainly, as what's going on in New York. I'm afraid, though, that level of cooperation probably isn't going to exist as it typically would in a situation like this. I mean, you have, Alvin Bragg, who prosecuted the now president of the United States successfully in New York. You have a U.S. attorney who is an appointee or nominee of the current president. I don't know that same cooperation level would exist. I mean, what I would typically see in a situation like this is the jurisdictions would sit down and say, who has the potential to impose the harshest possible penalty for this horrendous act? And that would be the federal government, because there would be that possibility with this terrorism enhancement of the death penalty. That doesn't exist on the table in the state of New York. There is no death penalty in New York. So I would think in most instances you defer to the federal government because they have the ability to impose the harshest sentence. But on the other side of that same issue is that New York doesn't believe in the death penalty. And so, they may say, listen, we want to prosecute this case. We don't think the death penalty is appropriate in any case. We don't have a death penalty in our state. This occurred in our state, and we want to prosecute it in the manner and impose the penalties in which the citizens of New York agree with. It's going to be an interesting situation to see how it plays out.
Yeah, and one thing I think about, going back to the charge of terrorism that's in the state of New York, this terrorism enhancement, this document, they argue that the definition of terrorism is using an action like murder to intimidate or coerce a population of people, and the population of people that they talk about are healthcare workers, and specifically people who work in the health insurance industry. Maybe it's a doctor who has a patient who's gets their claim denied, and the doctor's concerned about what that patient would do, or someone who worked at a call center. And they listed some of the things that have been said to call center workers related to Luigi Mangione in the wake of Brian Thompson's death. With that said, I'm sure call center workers for health insurance companies have been on the business end of some tough phone calls prior to Brian Thompson's death. But when you think of I guess a civilian group of people, does someone's employment, do healthcare workers actually be able to reach the threshold of a group of people that would be the target of a terrorist attack?
Well, I think you make an interesting point, and I think that this manifesto, sort of supports that idea that this is terrorism, because it's clear that he's trying to use, at first it was some sort of mass casualty event, and then it evolved into the CEO of UnitedHealthcare. Um, but he's trying to make a political statement. He's trying to persuade people politically and bring to the forefront this idea that healthcare costs are outrageous and that patients are not being, um, you know, are being ignored, and the concerns for patients are being ignored because it's all the bottom line. And that, in this political climate, is a political statement. I mean, we've gone years and years and years with the Affordable Care Act and trying to overturn the Affordable Care Act, and how do people you know pushing for health care for everyone. So this is a really um, partisan, polarizing political issue. And yeah, I think he's trying to influence that political issue, and we know that by what he's written. And I think that this manifesto certainly enhances the idea that this was an act of terrorism.
And lastly for you, Matt, and this probably isn't the most well-worded legal question, but I'm not a lawyer, so I'll ask it anyway. Because when I read that confession, and he's going through saying why he did it, didn't mean to cause, sorry for all the trauma I caused everybody, but this is the reason I did it. Healthcare costs are really high, life expectancy is all this. And I'm looking at this and I think about the cost of everything that's going to be related to Luigi Mangione's federal trial and his state trial. And it's like, if he wants to have done this for this reason and he's guilty and he's ready to accept, like, why are we even at the point where he's pleading not guilty and we're still going through with all of this when, in his own words, and I get everybody deserves a fair trial and the process and all that, but it just feels like if this is what he wanted the entire time, why are we going to go through this long process that could take years?
Well, that's why we have a constitution. That's why we have due process. It's easy to look at Luigi Mangione and say, "Hey, look, why are we doing this? This is really useless. He's taking responsibility. This is the outcome he wanted." But still, we in our system of American justice, force the government to prove cases beyond a reasonable doubt, and afford someone who's charged with a crime all the due process and notice and ability to defend themselves and cross-examine witnesses. Sometimes it seems like, hey, this is political theater. This really isn't a trial, but we do it for those cases in which it isn't as clear cut as it might be in this case, and to protect those people who would be confronted with a charge, and again, a rush to judgment that, hey, he did it. Let's just send him down the river. While it seems in some sense that this is a ridiculous process, we do it to protect those people who may someday be falsely charged.
No, that's really well put. Matt Mangino, thank you for taking the time to join us on Law and Crime. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
That will do it for On the Case, presented by Law and Crime. Subscribe to us on YouTube and Spotify. I'm Chris Stewart. We'll see you next time.